Hi, welcome to Left Foot Media. My name is Brendan Malone. Well, a couple of days ago, Bloomberg published an article entitled Hollywood Might Not Bounce Back from Theatre's $1.3 billion Stock Collapse. Yes, the news really is as bad as the headline suggests. Basically, about $1.3 billion has been wiped off the value of the top 4 North American cinema operators since August the 1st. So obviously this is a pretty drastic and major shift in a very short amount of time. Let me read to you one of the important points from the article itself. Even with the new Star Wars, a Marvel superhero movie, and the sequel to Blade Runner on the docket for the holiday season, the box office is unlikely to make up for a severe hit in the third quarter. So in other words, things are looking really bad for Hollywood and for cinemas in general, because obviously they rely on the content that Hollywood is putting out. Why is this happening though? Well, I think there's a couple of things at play here. First of all, the technology is changing for sure, and there's definitely a factor here about ease of access to new release films in an environment where we very much expect to be able to watch content pretty quickly or almost instantly online, and we don't expect to pay a lot of money for it either. Whereas cinemas tend to be bucking that trend. You pay a one-off fee, which in some instances can be quite expensive, for one viewing of a film, and there's absolutely no guarantee that what you're actually going to see is good. Because of some of the other issues we're going to talk about in a second, I think a lot more people now are waiting too before they go and watch movies. They don't just buy into the hype of a big flash trailer that sort of tries to lure them in. Instead, they wait for the new advances in technology to read online reviews about films, much like we do with other products before we commit. We make sure that we're committing to something that's going to be worth our money. And so I think a lot more people are hesitant to jump in on opening weekends. And often if a movie doesn't get a good review, that can really be the death of it. Even if that's unfair, the hype around a movie can really do a lot of damage now. So the technology is a factor here. The other problem with Hollywood at the moment is that it is now riddled with propaganda. And not just movies, but even the awards ceremonies. We've seen the drop-off with the Oscars in the last couple of years. Moonlight won the award last year when everyone, even people who thought who were okay with some of the ideology in these films, even they were saying it wasn't as good as other movies last year. And so this clearly appears to be an ideologically motivated decision. It's about propaganda, and propaganda has really crept into a lot of films, and I think it really annoys a lot of people. They don't want to go and see movies that they know are driven by or are loaded with ideology and propaganda. Regardless of where you are on the political spectrum, you still want to go and see a movie that tells a good story, that has some magic, that draws you out of the world for an hour or two and allows you to escape. And then there's the much bigger issues. And I think this is where, on top of the technology and the propaganda issue, I think Hollywood is really undermining itself now because of the way it is choosing to operate. Hollywood now really suffers from a lack of creativity. There just is not that same level of creativity that we've seen in previous eras coming out of Hollywood. And one of the things we can point to as evidence for this is the amount of reboots and sequels that are taking place. And not just reboots and sequels, but sequels from movies that have been and gone for a decade or two or more. And there's something about that speaks to the fact there's a lack of creativity here, that it's not new and original stories that are coming to the fore anymore and that are being rewarded. Instead, it's attempts to try and cash in on nostalgia from a previous franchise or a previous era. And not only that, but not only they're trying to cash in on it, but they're actually going the next step and rebooting something. They're not telling new and original stories, perhaps, in that franchise. They're going back and they are trying to recreate the whole thing or destroy the original film and replace it with something new. And more we're seeing that people are starting to rebel against that. They're saying, I don't want this, I'm not interested in this, stop destroying something that was already good, stop trying to load it up with propaganda. Ghostbusters last year was a classic example of this. You can blame misogyny all you want till you're blue in the face. It had nothing to do with misogyny why this movie flopped. It flopped because it was an attempt to take an existing franchise that was good, that didn't need to be rebooted, to reboot it, and on top of that, you rebooted it based on ideology and propaganda. That was, you were trying to force that down people's throats. And surprise, surprise, it didn't work. People weren't interested in that, and so the tickets just didn't sell. The other thing that's a problem now is that the cinematic universe. It's become formulaic. we are now producing movies on a production line. And if you're a regular watcher of this channel, you'll know that over a year ago, in May last year, I published a video when I was publishing something called The Daily, every day a new video, and I published a video basically saying that Star Wars and Marvel movies were about to become boring. And people scoffed at me at the time. They said, that'll never happen. Well, here we are, and the proof actually seems to be in the bottom line here. People are not turning out, and not just that, but I'm hearing and reading and seeing more and more commentary online from people who are saying, yeah, that Marvel movie was okay, yeah, it was all right, but it wasn't anything special. And more people, I think the hype has really started to die down now. I think, now, if you're a Marvel fanatic, then you're going to probably be screaming at your computer screen right now and saying, how dare you speak ill of our Lord and Savior Tony Stark and the Avengers. You know, it's the reason that is because you're kind of like U2 fans. I'm a fan of the band U2, but I'm not an obsessive fan of U2. And so when they released Achtung Baby, their album in 1991, it was a great album. Then they released Zooropa a couple of years later. I think it was 93 that came out, and that was okay. It had a couple of good songs on it, but it wasn't as good as Achtung Baby. And then in 97, when the album Pop came out, that was not a good album. But you will still encounter diehard U2 fans who will try and tell you that Pop was just an underrated album. No, it wasn't underrated. It was a bad album. It just wasn't good, even though U2 were the ones who were putting this album out. And it's very much like that with Marvel. Because you're so obsessed and you so love the Marvel universe, and good on you, it's your thing, right? But what happens is that colours your view of what's actually happening, and it means that when Marvel puts out something that's not so good, you still look for the good in it and are willing to overlook the bad or the problems that are there because you love everything about Marvel. Like that U2 fan who loves everything about U2 to the point where U2 could release fingernails scratching down a blackboard, and as long as you put the Edge's custom delay sound on that blackboard scratching and you had Bono singing over the top of it about some issue, then they would love it. And they would say, this is the best thing ever, because they're just so obsessed with U2, even though it's actually not. The point is, though, if you look honestly at Marvel, a lot of their selling points are starting to get stale now. Robert Downey Jr. and the Iron Man character. It was fresh, it was exciting, it was new a few films ago, but now it's not. It has become same old, same old. It's formulaic because they've put so much of the stuff into the marketplace. Now, this was inevitable, like I said in my previous video. If you just churn out lots and lots and lots of the same thing, people are going to get bored. It's going to become stale. People are going to become ambivalent about it. That's what happens. That's not how creativity works. The Avengers, they were fresh and exciting. They're not anymore. The Russo brothers, Captain America Civil War, one of the best Marvel movies that's ever been released. And the Russo brothers, they had the same producers, same directors, same writing team. And then they put out Civil War, the exact same team. Civil War just pales in comparison. It is just nowhere near as good a movie. It feels too long. It's convoluted. It just misses all the beats that Captain America Civil War got right. So even the Russo brothers, who were sort of the bright shining star of this Marvel Cinematic Universe. And basically, I think a lot of people now are talking about Marvel movies as being movies that are being made to set up other movies. You go to the films not so much to see the film as to see what content is going to be in the movie that relates to another film. Even people are starting to use this as an excuse now. You know, that talking about, for example, something like Doctor Strange, and you know, you have to go and see it because it's I'm going to see this film because I want to see how this ties in or what they set up for the Infinity Wars. And you've got to go and see this because he's such an important character in the Infinity Wars. And these films, though, if it was any other character, or you took the Marvel brand off it and he was just Mr. Strange and someone had tried to make an original superhero film like this, you would say, yeah, it was a pretty average film and I probably wouldn't recommend it and I probably wouldn't buy it. Why? Because it doesn't place creativity ahead of formula. They've got a formula. They've got a cinematic universe they're trying to build here instead of working to try and encourage and create opportunities for creativity. Star Wars is now heading down that same path. It's not as far advanced because Star Wars has not yet created a cinematic universe where everything is interdependent on each other. They're still very much in a new trilogy phase, and they're making standalone films that sort of tie back to things, but they are not setting up things in the future. They're not creating a big, massive spider web of films so far. But I wouldn't be surprised if that's what happens, because they're owned by the same company. They will now start following, I'm sure, at some point, the Marvel model. However, Already, though, Star Wars has got problems. There is a lot of online criticism and questioning of the new young Han Solo movie. And the more I think about it, the more I think, why do we need this film? We just don't need this movie. There's no point to this movie being made because this really isn't a Han Solo movie. When you think about who and what the character of Han Solo is and why we like him so much, it's because when we encountered him in Star Wars, he was this roguish smuggler who goes on a redemption journey. He's got a whole lot of character traits that have been built up over a lifetime. And there's lots of visual cues in the movie that very cleverly tell you this. The state of the Millennium Falcon, the way he won it, it's just sort of mentioned in passing. The clothes he wears, the blaster he uses. These are all little visual clues that speak to you and tell you something about this character. And they're all really about a lifetime of experience that is, and backstory that's put into this character. But when you go back and tell the story of young Han Solo, he's not going to have any of that stuff, and so he's going to be a completely different character. And I don't think it's going to work. Those of you who have seen Indiana Jones, The Last Crusade, which is just a great film and a pretty good franchise. And in that film, at the very beginning of that film, we have young Indiana Jones, who is briefly shown. There's a sequence with the young Indiana Jones to set that film up, and River Phoenix plays him, and it's great. It serves a purpose. It's part of this bigger plot, but you would not want to watch an entire young Indiana Jones movie like that because it wouldn't be the same character. The reason we loved Han Solo in The Force Awakens was because it was the original character of Han Solo that we saw on display there, this gruff, rough around the edges, slightly less than honest smuggler who's just trying to make his way in the world. And that's very much the Han Solo that we met in The Force Awakens. It's the same character. Right? It wasn't just harking back to that character. If in that film they had an old Han Solo sitting around in robes, sipping blue milk and talking about the glory days and perhaps using a few Han Solo quotes, it wouldn't have worked. It just wouldn't have worked because it wouldn't have been the same character. There's no progression or natural character development in that. It's not the same character at all. And I think the same is true of this young Han Solo movie. It's not going to work. So how do we fix this problem? How does Hollywood solve this problem? Well, there's three things I think that need to change. First of all, I think there needs to be a renewed focus on creativity instead of cash. A friend of mine always likes to say, money always follows a good idea, and I think the same is true if you're producing content that's actually worthy of people's time and effort to go and watch. If you produce a movie that is actually good, that focuses on things that movies are supposed to be good at, and is not formulaic, it's not part of a production line, then guess what? People will want to see that film. So creativity is the only way I think you can spark back into life what is sort of deficient in Hollywood right now. We need to realize as well that magic is not the same thing as special effects. Movie magic is about more than just a whole lot of impressive looking digital effects that sort of fly in your face on screen. It's about being brought into something, which brings me to my final point. You really need stories, not universes. What Hollywood needs is to remember that cinema is actually about telling good stories through a visual medium. It's not about propaganda, it's about creativity. It's about a good story. It's about strong characters with clear motivations. It's about a journey that a character goes on. It's about changes that happen to a character. It's about us, the moviegoers, being able to relate to the character, and follow them on their journey. It's about things that happen that don't draw us out of the movies, ex machina things and things that our subconscious brain knows just are not realistic and not legit, and so they don't actually draw us deeper into the story. They pull us out of the movie. It's about good storytelling. And if Hollywood doesn't rediscover that and remain stuck in this focus on creating a universe solely with an emphasis on making money, then Hollywood is just going to keep struggling, and more people are going to avoid going to films. They're going to try and see them other ways, because why would you part with your hard-earned cash? Remember, at the moment, some movies will cost you maybe more than what a Netflix subscription, a month's worth of Netflix would cost you, where you could watch their entire catalogue unlimited for that month, as opposed to paying more than that to watch one film just once and then to discover that it's really not that great a film. So what we need to do is scrap the formula, scrap the production lines, and actually take a bold risky revisioning of Hollywood, if you like, where we go back to, I think, less movies, but more focus on creativity. Less movies that are better, I think, would be far better for everyone. And I think it's the only way that Hollywood is really going to start recouping and discovering that cinema, again, is something that people want to invest their time and money in. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time on Left Foot Media.